So, you may not know this about me, but when I'm not spending my time doing schoolwork or writing video scripts or some third activity that allows you to realize I am both an incredibly boring person as well as a somewhat tragic one, I read a lot of webcomics. Like, a lot. A lot. A lot. It's honestly disappointing how much time I spend reading webcomics compared to doing literally any activity. Some of these comics are hosted on Webtoon, a comic publishing website owned by the Line Corporation that was launched in South Korea in 2004, but seems to have only gained a large Western audience in recent years. And one of these webtoons is one I've grown to like quite a bit, to the point that I've read it twice in one night. See, it's all connected. You gotta work around. Of course, if you've seen the title, I'm sure you know that I'm talking about Heir's Game. In the fictional Georgian land of duchies, when the heir to the throne reaches the age of 25, he must host a game known as the Heir's Game, a dueling contest in which the winner will serve as the heir's bodyguard, lifting common duelists out of squalor. Focusing primarily on the duelist Isran, a silent and stoic duelist, though neither of these traits are exactly by choice, who turns heads the day that the Heir's Game is so much as announced, and Lord Thuden, forgive me if I mispronounce that, the heir that the Heir's Game is focused on. A somewhat frivolous, but truly kind and loyal person who has a lot to overcome if he ever wants to rule. It's a story full of drama, violence, political intrigue, and even, despite it all, love? Maybe. The story was created by Suspu, a Finnish artist who had previously gotten pretty big on Webtoon for his story Shoot Around, about a girls' basketball team and their coach trying to survive the apocalypse. If you don't like Heir's Game, you'll definitely like Shoot Around. I'll be honest, this story probably doesn't need my help promoting, especially considering my videos not about Supernatural don't really get that much attention, but if I can convince at least one person in my audience to read this story, it will have been worth it. I could probably just say, hey, it's gay and there's swords, isn't that enough? However, I think you figured out by now that I'm something of an overachiever, so I'll give you 5 reasons why you should be reading Heir's Game. I've already expressed much of the plot that I've seen in the first couple of episodes, and I don't want to spoil anything beyond the series Season 1, but even just there we got multiple assassination attempts and the motives to do so, which indicate political turmoil of the likes we weren't even aware of, in between daring swashbuckling and the drama of the upper class. I wouldn't call the story basic, but I feel like it's so hard to describe without revealing too much about the inner workings of it, considering I've read it almost 3 times at this point since starting this video script. I'm starting to figure out how the whole thing is held together, and the last thing you want to hear about the first time you see a particularly stunning magic act is that the cards were up his sleeve the whole time, so pardon me for being brief, but it is very good. I'll be less brief from here on out. We got character complexity up in this bitch, y'all! From the main characters that we follow from episode to episode, to secondary antagonists given complex and varied motives, to side characters that don't have any larger role in the story, but we grow to care about anyways, just due to repeated exposure. I'm going to talk about this between my 2 favorite characters, Isran and Dahlia. Isran kind of gives off Geralt vibes as somebody who has never seen The Witcher, as he's often viewed as something strong and powerful, but is also kind of treated like an elusive commodity to those around him, less sensitive to him or his feelings, based on his skills and his status as a foreign entity in this strange land. But he's his own person. A little dense and naturally a loner, but somebody who truly does yearn for kindness and companionship, even if he doesn't know how to initiate such a thing for himself. He has a tragic past with a history of bloodshed and combat under his belt, but he's truly looking toward a brighter future. Dahlia is a pink-haired assassin and rebel against the ruling power who hopes to kill Thuden. Not because she has anything particularly against him, personally, but because she wants to put his father through the same pain and anguish he unknowingly and uncaringly subjected her to. She gives off the vibe of this cold and cruel person, but with no past to go back to and no future ahead of her, you can't help but see her as this tragic figure, even as she vies against our protagonist. The fact that she reminds me so much of Elise from Shootaround probably helps as well. Like, I don't know if this proves anything beyond basic reading comprehension, considering I've read far, far more into far, far less, but from the cast of guards whose names you never get to learn to a painting duo who only shows up in 2 chapters, you kind of learn how to care about everyone, but not to the point of it being suffocating or overwhelming. Romance is hard to write. Or so I've heard, considering how many pieces of media don't seem to do it right, and how many webtoons I read that are just about 2 people who hate each other who learn to fall in love. But I feel like you really get to believe Isran and Thuden's dynamics with each other. Not just because we have a view into their thoughts and learn of their fondness and they actually get to spend time together, but because the 2 of them actually seem to make the other better as they spend time together. Thuden, a posh and spoiled royal who has never seen a day of hardship in his life, becomes strong and even brave in Isran's presence. And Isran, the mysterious and emotionally distant duelist, is willing to open up about things that nobody else in the story has been able to get him to do. By spending time together, not only does the relationship become more and more fond, but they become better and better people, even when they're apart. Of course, I did say arcs, didn't I? That's right, arcs, plural! I've been hiding 2 adorable lesbians behind my back this entire time! I didn't really say anything sooner as their plot is relatively secondary, but still important, of course. Sevilla is another duelist in the Heir's game, and one of Isran's self-proclaimed friends. And Rioja is a noblewoman who is expected to make nice with Lord Thuden while she resides in duchies. I haven't really touched on them as they're off doing that classic lesbian period flick thing of, we're from 2 different worlds, yet I care for you. But please know that I would die for both of them, and it would be an honor. Know how I was specifically able to specify that this series took place in a Georgian era, instead of something more medieval or Victorian? That's not because I'm enough of a history nerd to recognize the Regency-era dress when I see one, but because the author outright said that those were the stylistic trappings that they were using for the story. And honestly, I think that adds so much to the world. For one, it's specific. The stylings of medieval, colonial, Victorian, and things of that ilk are very familiar to us. I'm not saying that you'd be able to identify Victorian from Edwardian at the drop of a hat, but you can broadly tell the difference based on the stylings of those eras, because they're consistently used in fiction. By using a time period often underutilized in fiction, it makes it feel dated without exactly giving you a date to name. Unless, again, you're really familiar with such eras at the drop of a hat. Basically what I'm saying is that if you know the era, it's great to have a chance to see it portrayed in such an eye-catching way in fiction, but if you don't, the setting gives off the sense of being set in an abstract past in an abstract world, while feeling very reminiscent of our own as much as it isn't. I'll be honest, this is just a chance for me to point out all the wonderfully drawn fashion seen throughout the story. I don't usually think about what characters wear unless it's something of plot or character significance, but this is making me reconsider. So, I'm pretty sure we've all seen somebody get impaled before. The same way that we've seen somebody get their arm chopped off, or anything like that. And it's always cool, of course, but there is something rather basic about it, don't you think? I mean, the fact of the matter is that everybody has seen this kind of violence before. Heir's game does have this violence, but it offers more visceral injuries. Like, I'm not gonna spoil anything beyond season 1, but there's this whole scene where Isran's arm just gets flat out flayed, and he just has to fight with the skin hanging off his arm. And that's not even the worst of it. It's just very, very cool, and very, very gross, and I love it, and wanted to make sure to mention it for the sake of the more visceral violence that gets seen later on, as a dumbass who likes that kind of thing. That's basically it. I just wanted to add a lot of things I personally liked about the series near the end there, but I hope that ups the credibility in some way, that there are these individual elements I can pluck from this series and uphold as things that I enjoyed, as broad as the story and as small as costume design. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'll be linking the creator's Twitter, Patreon, and the webtoon in question in the description down below, so you can check them out. Please, feel free to subscribe as usual. There'll be more opportunities to come for me to continue to spew random bullshit. Goodbye for now, I suppose.